Hey everybody, it's Chris Murray here, President and founder of Child Care Marketing Solutions, founder of the Child Care Success Academy, where we help you as a preschool owner, director, or leader drive towards a much more successful program, fully enrolled, fully profitable, fully hired, and an amazing culture of excellence and collaboration. We are going to talk about financials, that terrible, terrible word, the F word, not that F word, but are you financially, are you tracking your financials, and are you literate? Are you knowledgeable? Do you have it at your fingertips, or do you have your head in the sand? So that's the question that I want you to ask yourself. And I'm going to give you some specific training right now about why it matters, where your profit margins should be in our industry, some benchmarks, and how to create a system for yourself so that you have your finger on the pulse of your financial picture at all times. It's super, super important. Whether you're an owner or a director, it's really, really important to understand your financials and be sharing those stats with your team so that they can understand where you're at, and really understanding where the pie goes in your school in terms of the income, because they might be counting heads going, doing the math on how much money the center earns in revenue and trying to figure out why they're only making $12 an hour. And so helping them understand the basic numbers of the business is fantastic. So that's definitely a best practice to help everybody on your team understand where you are heading, and for you to all row the boat in the same direction. I gave an analogy about whether you're rowing your boat with 12 or 15 or 50 other human beings by yourself, which is going to be exhausting, or if they are helping you row and all in the same direction. And sharing the financial data, you don't necessarily have to share profit margin with your teachers, but sharing some of the financial benchmarks and data will help them understand how difficult it can be to make money in a childcare setting. So let's dig in. Brian Dupre in Dallas did an amazing session. Brian Dupre on my team, he's a coach and he's also an owner of 5 childcare centers in Maine with his wife, Carol. We love him to pieces. And he did a session on passion, purpose, and profitability, and why passion and purpose are necessary for you to also be ultimately profitable. And it was an amazing session. And why I'm bringing you this financial training today is because so many childcare leaders and owners have a head in the sand mentality around money. And they also feel like being in childcare, I don't know if you have a Mother Teresa complex, I don't know what it is, but they feel like because they're caring for children, they shouldn't necessarily be focused on the money, which is totally fine. I don't want you necessarily to be focused on the money. I want you to be focused on high quality, on helping train your teachers to be collaborative, to be excellent, on your culture, on your marketing so you can stay fully enrolled, on parent satisfaction and all those things, customer service. But I also want you to be focused on the money side, because if you're not making money and you're nervous about making payroll right now, you need this training. So just stick with me. What you should, one benchmark that we talked about in Florida at our quarterly mastermind 3 days ago was, how much money should you have in savings? And is it important or smart to get a business line of credit, otherwise known as a block, BLOC? And my answers to those questions is yes, it's important to have a business line of credit. And I recommend finding a bank that's going to give you a $100,000 line of credit. And the time to ask the bank is when you don't need it. And it's important for you to have enough money in the bank to cover 3 payroll cycles. 3 payroll cycles. So you got to have a cushion. So because when what hits the fan, and it's going to, you will be so grateful and so happy that you don't have to stress and you don't have to be awake at night trying to figure out where you're going to get the money to cover payroll. So that's why you need to focus on your financials. We have a case study of a gal who unfortunately never managed the money in her school. And I'm not going to reveal the identity of this person. It's a good friend of mine. But she focused on the quality and the enrollment and did amazing marketing and grew her school and was full, but she still wasn't looking at the profit margins, and she still wasn't managing her staff labor costs so that she could make sure that she can cover payroll taxes. And the IRS she was in debt to pay taxes to Uncle Sam. That's not a good place to be. And many of you guys have been in that place, and then you're paying back what you owe to the IRS over time, and then you figure out how to make it work. But let's avoid all of that pain in the beginning, shall we? Let's set you up with a system so that you can understand how to read your financial statement, and you can get your financials, your P&L, profit and loss statement. I want you to be getting it on at least the 20th, if not the 15th of the month prior to what happened. In general, the month that just passed, I want you to have that data by the 20th of the following month. Does that make sense? So that is a best practice, because you need to be looking at your profit margins and you need to be understanding where the money is going. Because if not, you can end up like my friend who ended up selling her school for much less than she would have and should have, because she wasn't focused on the money side. And she had a head in the sand mentality around looking at her financials. So I want you to block on your calendar on the 20th of the month to have at least half hour, preferably an hour conversation, sit down side by side with your accountant or with your financial manager of your schools. And if you don't have a person, if that person is you, then you need to find somebody to have on your team part-time. And one thing that was shared in our recent meeting by Mike Garatoni, he was like, just write that. You could find a part-time financial manager or a part-time financial and HR person or a part-time accountant / bookkeeper to handle your QuickBooks pretty readily for not a lot of money, because there's a lot of moms hanging out at home that would like to find part-time work who can do QuickBooks in their sleep, who you can hire in your community and get that hired out and have somebody on your team helping you manage the money that you can then sit with and look at the buckets, and maybe they can create a budget for you if you don't have a budget yet. Okay, so you need help with this, especially if it's something that you hate to do yourself. Then you should definitely be outsourcing it, because it's not a natural strength for you. If you love doing it and you're on it, Johnny on the spot with your numbers and you're rocking it, then you can keep it, but you also need to be maybe having another set of eyes to look at the financial statement with you, maybe a spouse, maybe a business partner, to help you see those opportunities for how you can pick up nickels on your financial statement. So that's the why. The why is because we just want you to stay open, thriving, have the data, not have a head in the sand mentality, not owe money to the IRS, not be stressing about covering payroll. And it's okay. Listen to me. Chris Murray says it's okay to make a good living. It's absolutely possible. Okay. And I give you permission to change your mindset around making a good living in the childcare industry. You deserve to be well paid for what you do. This business, this industry, running a childcare program is too full of risk to not make a good income. Quoted from Vernon Mason, who said that on my stage in Dallas. Here's numbers that you should know. So you should know your 2018 financials, revenue and profit margin. You should know in your head what money you made at the top line of your financial statement, income, and what was your profit margin for 2018. Your homework is to pull those numbers together and have a clean financial statement with bucketed expenses, expense categories, a chart of accounts, right? Laid out on your QuickBooks or whatever financial system you're using, and know those numbers. So we made 1.1 million in 2018. We grew 22% from, these aren't my numbers, I'm just sharing with you what yours might be. We grew 22% from the year prior, and So we went from $800,000 in revenue to 1.1, and we went from a 17% profit margin to a 19% profit margin. That is a healthy business. Is your business growing in health, in financial health, or is it declining, or is it flat? So you want to share those numbers with your team. I recently did the numbers and knew that we grew 22% this year. And we are on target to grow 50% next year, in 2019. So we have a very aggressive growth goal this year, but we've staffed up and we know exactly how we're going to get there. And I have it all laid out by month, exactly what our revenue targets are. And we're going to be looking at what we hit monthly and see if we hit our targets. And if not, then you can adjust. And that's the beauty of it, is if you lay out your targets and you go, I want to go from 2.2 million to 2.5 million. And here's how I'm going to get there in the months. Where are the months going to take place for the increases? So you can map those out and you can maybe say, well, we're going to grow our summer camp program or what have you. Or we're going to expand by 30 kids because we're going to transform the gym into another classroom and just reduce the size of the gym. And that's going to happen by September. So by September, we're going to be able to grow in monthly revenue. So having those projections, thinking about your year, laying it out for yourself and your team. So that's financials, your revenue, your profit margin, your targets, your goals. With your financial statement, you want to have buckets of key expense categories as a percent of revenue. I'll get to that in a minute. First, EBITDA. What's EBITDA? So you might hear people talking about EBITDA, and you might be like, what the hell is that? So it stands for earnings before interest, tax, depreciation, and amortization. So if you have a lot of stuff that you own, you have vehicles, you have capital equipment, you have buildings, those all can be depreciated. And the depreciation actually will help you. It actually is money that flows back in because you can write off your depreciation. So if you buy a building or you buy a vehicle, there's there might be like a 7-year depreciation cycle or schedule that your accountant will know that you can depreciate, because the value of those things, remember you hear like when you drive it off the lot, it immediately loses value and so that's depreciation. Okay. And so you actually get a benefit on your tax return. Uncle Sam gives you money to take into account the fact that you're an owner of capital stuff in a business that depreciates. So, because Uncle Sam wants you to keep buying stuff, right? We want the economy to keep rolling. So earnings, this is earnings before all those things. So earnings before any interest that you earned on accounts or different things, property. Tax, earnings before you pay the tax man. Depreciation and amortization. So it's a fancy term, EBITDA. And really it's the two biggest buckets there are taxes. So many of us are paying a 6-figure tax bill. Once you get into 2 or 3 million, you're paying, 150 G's of tax, and your owner draw. And so this is after salaries are paid, and hopefully you're paying yourself a salary. But you also are compensated with a monthly or a quarterly owner distribution or draw. Okay. And so that's before all of that's taken out, that's your EBITDA number. And so what's a healthy EBITDA? Do you guys know? And I'm just going to check in and make sure that you guys are still with me. So go ahead and share. If you know what your EBITDA is, if you'd like to share what that percentage is, feel free. But what for childcare businesses, for preschool businesses, and at least in the US, what's a healthy or normal range for EBITDA or an earnings number? This is basically profit margin. So the percentage is benchmark 12 to 16% is a benchmark profit margin range for you to know whether or not you're healthy in your business. And I'll go back here to these slides. So where are you? What is your EBITDA number? So if you have just to do the math easy, if you have $1 million business, you want at your bottom line earnings, this is before your owner draw and before you pay tax, you want at least $120,000 of profit margin or EBITDA. Okay, because that's 12%. So 12% of $1 million is 100. Did I do that right? $120,000. I think so. And let's see. Let's check my math. Let's see if I'm doing my math whiz. You would think that that would be easy math to do, but sometimes the numbers get goofy with the percentages. Yeah, that's 12%. Duh. So you want at least $120,000 of EBITDA ranging up to $200,000. So 20% profit margin is, we have lots of clients in our academy who are getting a 20% profit margin. And it depends on a lot of factors. So this is the important part for you to know. First of all, it depends on how full you are. So if you are, and it also depends on how big you are. If you have capacity for 100 children and you have 80 children total enrolled, they're all full-time equivalents. So I'm not talking about 80 part-timers. I'm talking about 80 kids, full-time equivalent. You are 80% enrolled to capacity, and that's going to impact your number versus if you have a center with 160 capacity and you have 140 enrolled, which is a much tighter, you're close to wait list at that point, right? And so you're going to be a much more profitable school, most likely, if you have 140 kids to a capacity of 160. So the fuller you are and the bigger you are, you have economies of scale. So we like to see schools have at least 120 capacity. You could certainly make money on 100, but 120 or 150, you start getting to that size where it can be a very profitable location. And the profit margin a lot of profit sits between that 80% and 100% enrolled number. So you might be thinking, hey, I'm 80% full, I'm sitting pretty, I'm doing good. Well, guess what? You're also missing out on a lot of profit because most of your fixed expenses are covered and even variable expenses are covered when you're at 80% full. So when you go from 80 to 100, you might have to add a teacher and you might have to add some food costs and some other things, but that's a really big, it almost all falls down to the bottom line. Does that make sense? So you also want to know what your percent of key expense categories as a percent of revenue are. So another benchmark is, and we teach this, which is what should your percentages be by category type. So you've got labor and wages and everything that has to do with employees, benefits, all in, labor, payroll tax. You've got equipment, like furniture and other equipment expenses, vans, etc. You've got facility costs, so rent, lease, maintenance, upkeep, mowing the lawn, facility costs, right? And then you've got food, if you serve food. And then you have like supplies and, office supplies, art supplies, those kinds of things. And those are really the 5 key buckets. So you want your labor bucket to be no more than 60% of revenue. So if you're $1 million program, your total revenue is $1 million. You want your all-in labor number, including payroll tax, benefits, training, onboarding, to be no more than $600,000 of that million. That's 60%. That's a high end. You really want it to be more like 520 or 550 in that 52% range. And it kind of depends on whether you include administrator salaries and your salaries in that number that will drive it back and forth. So that 52% usually does not include administrator salaries in your salary, okay? If you're the owner. So those give you some benchmarks, and we go more in depth on this in training in different classes that we do. But just for this Facebook Live, I wanted just to give you knowledge of what you should be tracking and numbers that you should know on your financial statement. So you can pull that information out of your QuickBooks by line item. You can pull the categories together, and then you can look at it versus the benchmarks that I just laid out for you. And there's different percentages. So understand where you sit versus benchmarks in the industry. And then finally, the 3 things you need for financial success. We've been talking about a reliable financial system. We've been talking about an accountant or a bookkeeper that gets you the information on your monthly P&L financial statement by the 20th of the month following the month that just happened. Well, that's fantastic. And to go through it and make adjustments and look what happened and look for errors and all of that. But you also, that month is already done now. So you can't go back and pick up the money from what just happened in December. But you can go forward and set a budget, which is number 3. So you need these 3 things: a comparison of your numbers versus benchmarks. I just took you through that a little bit. A budget, and a reliable, predictable system with somebody on your team that is actually providing the information that you need. Moving forward, this gets back to Brian Dupre's session that he did on passion and purpose and profits, because your financial success impacts your growth and your ability to make a difference, and how to get the path for wealth in this industry. There's lots of wealthy people who own childcare centers, who own chains of them. The path to wealth is to multiply locations or expand. So without expansion, you will not expand the possibility for you for your wealth picture. And finances are a must for expansion. You have to be dialed into your finances and to what's going on with the money side of the business if you're going to expand and be successful in this business. You just have to. So that will fuel your vision. It will fuel your passion, because if you have money that you can then reinvest into the business and get a splash pad, or get a better playground, or get rid of your mulch and get AstroTurf, or poured rubber into your playground to improve the parent and child experience in your school, that's going to set you up for growth and success. So reinvesting in the business, in software and tools and all sorts of things to help you be better. And the way you do that is through finances, guys. So you can have a bigger vision. You can have a very clarified why. You can go after it with passion and drive, and expand to make a bigger difference on the world and on the kids in your community. But you can't do that if you don't look at your finances and if you have a head in the sand mentality about your money.